and more. By Observer Staff. P.O. Box 1228 Campbell, California 950091228. June 8, 1992. The man who has almost surely been involved in the pro wrestling business longer than anyone in the history of this profession called it quits Saturday night. Don Owen, the 80-year-old promoter of pro wrestling in Oregon, made a tearful announcement before just 80 fans at the Portland Sports Arena that the May 30th show would be his last as a promoter. Saturday ended 68 years of involvement in pro wrestling by Owen, who started out as a teenager helping out his father Herb Owen back in 1925, when Babe Ruth and Ty Cobb ruled baseball. Jack Dempsey and Strangler Lewis were the kings in boxing and wrestling respectively. The NFL was a fledgling barnstorming league and the NBA was more than 2 decades away from being formed. Owen and brother Elton Owen took over Oregon territory after their father passed away, and Don became the main man as the years went by. It seemed inevitable when Owen was unable to land a new television station after longtime station KBTV canceled his Saturday night Portland wrestling show at the end of 1991, that it would spell the end for the man who called himself the last of the Mohicans in his farewell speech. However, the timing of it came as a surprise to almost everyone involved, although it was expected it would occur. The retirement of Owen doesn't spell an end to the Oregon regional circuit, as Sandy Barr, who had run most of the spot towns in recent years along with being a referee in Portland, will be taking over with help of son Jesse Barr. The timing of the retirement was most likely due to it being a choice over whether Owen would continue as promoter, but with no television and no future, or whether he would turn it over to Barr, who had worked out a Japanese deal and a television deal which gave the promotion at least hopes for a breath of new life. Owen was gracious in talking about Barr, who had been maneuvering behind the scenes to get full control of the circuit, which will be renamed Championship Wrestling USA. Barr is very close to a deal with CH32 in Portland, which would improve the local television coverage from the public access station in Portland, which saw crowds dwindle from a few hundred a week down below 100 in recent weeks, even with kids allowed in free. Owen blamed his departure, in cryptic terms, on the problems that Tom Peterson, the longtime sponsor of the program who declared bankruptcy in 1991, suffered, and attempting to compete with the WWF. The WWF had offered CH12 its syndicated show to air in place of the Portland wrestling show on Saturday night, which inevitably spelled the doom for Owen. KBTV had been paying the weekly production costs for Portland wrestling, and without Peterson's sponsorship and with the decline in television ratings, it made the show a losing proposition for the station. The negotiations with the WWF for the slot made the decision easier because the station could keep airing pro wrestling in the traditional late Saturday night time slot. Basically, Owen said that he could no longer compete with the big boys and he's had a great run and it was time to step aside. When announcing Barr as the new promoter, with Barr then announcing his retirement as referee, Owen said, "I hope Sandy can make a go of it because I don't want to see our style of wrestling die." The few regulars who were still attending were very emotional during his goodbye speech. Barr's first official card was on June 1st in Portland. As reported here last week, Barr and son Jesse reached a deal a few weeks back to work out a talent exchange agreement with the newly formed Oriental Pro Wrestling promotion in Japan headed by Ryuma Go and Masahiko Takasugi, 2 longtime Japanese journeyman wrestlers along with Go's protege, Madi Irakura, will be working as regulars in Oregon, and the Oregon talent will become regulars when Oriental Pro Wrestling runs its tours, with the first one tentatively scheduled for next month. Barr, with a Japanese connection, told Japanese reporters that the only way to compete locally against the WWF would be by running a Japanese-style promotion. To that end, the matches on Saturday night were all very long with a solid wrestling product, with a 5-match show lasting from 8:30 to 11:15 with few delays in between matches because the bouts went 20 to 35 minutes each. Although this has yet to be announced in the United States, the WWF is already hyping SummerSlam on its television shows that aired this past weekend in Europe. The European version of the shows did indicate SummerSlam for a European site, but claimed the site had yet to be determined and contained interviews with various WWF babyfaces saying which city in Europe they hoped the show would be. The show is confirmed for the 85,000-seat Wembley Stadium in London on August 29, with an August 31 air date on pay-per-view in the United States and Canada. They also announced on the European show the following matches for SummerSlam: Randy Savage vs. Ric Flair for the WWF title, Bret Hart vs. Shawn Michaels for the Intercontinental title, Legion of Doom vs. Beverly Brothers, and Undertaker vs. Berserker. It is not known whether this is a definite show or just matches that will be changed after angles that have yet to be shot air in subsequent television shows, since it differs from the top matches we had been given about 10 days ago. WCW wrestlers this past week all received a letter officially listing the new rules, most of which had either been previously speculated upon here or talked about in a previous announcement to the wrestlers when Bill Watts appeared at the house show a few weeks back in Savannah, Georgia. Effective on June 1st, the rules, dubbed the 10 Commandments, by the wrestlers, go as follows. Use of the ring barricades and the ring post is forbidden and will also be cause for an automatic disqualification. Wrestling outside the ring is discouraged. Absolutely no low blows. First offense is a $1,000 fine, second offense is a $2,500 fine, and third offense is a $5,000 fine and will be considered a breach of contract. If a wrestler is hit low, he is to make every effort not to sell the move as a low blow. All wrestlers are due in the building 1 hour before the scheduled starting time of the show, with fines again being implemented for being late of $1,000 for a first offense, $2,500 for a second offense, and $5,000 and a breach of contract for a third offense. Missing an event except in the case of the most severe injuries is considered a breach of contract. The only excusable exception to this rule is an act of God. Wrestlers who are injured and can't perform are still expected to make the town in order to show the fans that WCW will no longer falsely advertising talent. The only exception would be a crippling injury which doesn't allow for traveling. Talking over the PA during the show is to be discouraged. Lewd hand gestures are prohibited, as is any cursing loud enough for the audience to hear. Fraternization, between heels and babyfaces, in public is not acceptable. This includes traveling together to and from the arena, to public appearances, restaurants, and even to the gym. This also includes faces and heels socializing together in social situations and the gym. No guests are allowed in the dressing room, including family members, media, etc. Each wrestler is allowed only 2 complimentary tickets to each show for friends and family. Any number of tickets above that number must be purchased at face value by the wrestler. Watts held a meeting on June 1st, before the first television taping under his auspices, and added some new directives. He's going to cut back on the length of the television tapings because he believes it burns out the fans and hurts the return gates in those cities, so the days of 25-match television tapings are done. Crowd enthusiasm also generally wanes after a certain point in those long tapings, which makes the television product appear lackluster. I will assume that means they will be doing more tapings. Either that or they'll have to cut down on the number of weekly television shows, which I wouldn't be surprised to see Watts attempt to do eventually, or an increase in the amount of repeated material, which is the other possibility, but I don't expect it. In what will be almost surely the most controversial new directive, Watts has banned everything off the top rope. The theory behind the rule is that it will enable heels to get heat a la Ray Stevens and Nick Bockwinkel in the early 1970s in the AWA when they got incredible heat when Stevens would illegally come off the top ropes behind the referee's back to lead to pinning babyfaces. I guess the idea is to cast Bobby Eaton in the Ray Stevens role on the heel side. However, in this day and age, with fans accustomed to moves of that variety and with wrestlers like Rick Steamboat and Brian Pillman, not to mention Jushin Liger and Great Muta, eliminating all moves from the top rope is attempting to retrogress the in-ring product itself, and take away what has probably been the single most universally accepted change worldwide of the past decade, which is the advent of the hot new acrobatic moves like moonsaults, Alabama jams, shooting stars, air Pillmans and the like. During the first television show, as a way to get the rule over, during a match with the Steiners versus Arnold Anderson and Steve Austin, Anderson climbed to the top rope and old Anderson immediately made him get off the rope before he could jump. Watts also banned the juice as in blood, not steroids, telling the boys the subject had become too controversial. Watts also addressed the subject of steroids and said that he would have to find out what TBS policy is regarding steroids. He said if TBS doesn't want the guys on steroids, then nobody is going to be on steroids because if they are, they won't wrestle for WCW, and it's as simple as that. As we've gone into, that subject isn't quite as easily dealt with, but we'll see how serious that is when we see the physiques of certain wrestlers over the next 6 weeks and what happens to certain main eventers who continue use. Most wrestlers had gone into the meeting under the impression, since steroids weren't mentioned in the original 10 Commandments, that Watts wouldn't be serious about the subject and WCW wouldn't test, so use would revert back to original levels rather quickly, which it pretty well had seemed to have lay, except in a few notable cases where use appears to have increased to well past original levels. As far as my personal viewpoint regarding the new rules, here goes. Eliminating use of barricades and ring posts will have no significant effect either positively or negatively. You can have super matches without ever using a ring post, smashing a head into a guardrail, etc. But eliminating those moves isn't going to have a significant effect on anything. As far as brawling outside the ring, overdoing it is a negative, but I disagree with eliminating it completely, but that's just my own opinion. There are wrestlers, and Cactus Jack comes to mind, who really aren't anything special in the ring, but with creative use of out-of-the-ring moves, have put together many memorable and exceptional matches. I've seen shows with match after match of brawling in the crowd and it gets old. But having one wild brawl all over the place every few house shows or pay-per-view shows becomes something different, and wrestling needs different things to avoid sameness and predictability, which in the long run leads to indifference.
No low blows? Good. Low blows are a turn-off to casual fans and family audiences.
That's where WCW needs help the most. Coming to the building on time? With all the traveling involved, one has to realize there are times when it may not be possible. However, in any job, you are supposed to get there on time, so it's hardly an unreasonable demand. The no-shows have been a large part in the destruction of house show business for WCW.
Somebody needs to get that problem under control, and tightening up standards for no-showing is only 3.5 years too late.
I've got a lot of opinions in regard to injuries, showing up, working hurt, etc. Pro wrestling is a tough profession. One of the inherent demands, aside from some athletic ability, charisma, crowd appeal, and the rest, is the ability to withstand punishment.
You can't wrestle for any length of time and not have nagging injuries. The nature of the profession makes it impossible.
When a wrestler gets older, the injuries nag a little more and take more time to heal. The basic instincts of any athlete is, when they are injured, to try and pretend they aren't, and play anyway.
Sometimes the psychological pain of being hurt is more damaging than the physical pain.
A wrestler has to be able to work hurt. It's part of the job description. But a wrestler also has to be able to recognize when they shouldn't work.
It's a fine balancing act, and the more macho one is as far as tolerance to pain or ignorance of pain, inevitably, the shorter the prime years of their career will be. Occasional physical freaks like Ric Flair are the exception here.
My feeling is that if a wrestler is injured in a way where they can't perform, but where traveling won't aggravate the injury, it is a great policy to send them to the towns and have them appear to the fans, realize the promotion isn't ripping them off. If they are babyfaces, they should do autograph signings before the show or during intermission so the fans won't feel cheated about not seeing someone advertised.
If they are a heel, they should work in the corner as a second for their replacement against their originally scheduled foe.
But at the same time, getting the athlete healthy has to be a prime concern.
Many injuries are easily aggravated by travel or require extensive rest to rehabilitate, and going from town to town every night makes extensive rest an impossibility.
Those guys don't need to travel. They need to get healthy. Bad backs are common because of the nature of taking bumps, and driving long distance in cars or taking long air flights is hell on a bad back that needs recuperation. If it's a bad shoulder or elbow, traveling generally won't aggravate the condition. While WCW does need to improve its attendance as one of many things to rebuild the relationship with fans, fans have to be taught and understood that if they want a solid wrestling product, they have to accept that the guys are inevitably going to break down under the stress.
Real injuries happen to hard-hitting athletes.
Some American wrestlers have suggested that one of the beauties of the Japanese touring system is that even though the guys work so hard and so brutal, they can survive it with a tremendous attendance record because the guys know you just don't miss shots unless you can't walk. But when the tour is over,
they get several weeks off before starting back out.
Perhaps arranging house shows in a 4 weeks on, 2 weeks off fashion, which would be completely revolutionary in this country, would be a way to ensure as little an attendance problem as possible while still mandating a very physical style of match. Guys who are hurt and probably shouldn't work can at least get it out until the end of the run, knowing they'll have 2 weeks off to rest their bodies up and recuperate. As far as lewd gestures go, I'm in complete agreement. Even though WCW doesn't attract as much of a family atmosphere crowd as WWF, and I'm not sure hardcore wrestling will ever attract a family crowd atmosphere, boxing doesn't, and the hardcore wrestling in Japan, while attracting big crowds on its own, doesn't attract a family atmosphere but rather a huge hardcore crowd.
Lewd gestures and loud swearing does turn off families, and you don't need to do things that will turn off people or make them embarrassed to be a fan.
Fraternization rules are probably preferable in the building itself and in certain public situations like personal appearances, although there has to be some reasonableness involved. For example, if 2 wrestlers, say Rick Steamboat and Rick Rude, are involved in a bitter feud on television, they probably shouldn't be seen in public together or even joking around in a gym. But if it's Rick Steamboat and Richard Morton, even though one is a face, the other a heel, I'm not sure them playing pool together in a place where there are only a few fans around is really doing anything negative for business, or even if they can't find anyone else around and want to train together in a gym. Yes, not allowed in the dressing room. While this has no effect whatsoever on rebuilding interest or anything else, it's not an unreasonable rule, and it's similar with how most sports franchises run their dressing rooms. As for comps, well, football teams that play to packed houses have similar rules, with players only being allowed a few comps for family and friends.
WCW isn't exactly playing to packed houses, nor is there any danger of that becoming prevalent in the near future.
I can see cracking down on someone wanting an unreasonable number of comps, but making a 2 per person rule seems strict on the surface. Whatever, but I'm sure if there are legit requests that need to be made, there will be exceptions. At least I'd certainly hope so. Not to always cite the WWF or All in New Japan as role models of perfectly run companies, because Lord knows they have their problems, but I'm sure the average house show all of those companies run, and in the case of All in New Japan, they as often as not play to packed houses. But all three groups are very liberal about freebies, and they are successful in running a consistently profitable house show business. Watts co-hosted the WCW Saturday Night Show that was taped on June 1st and will air on June 13th, proclaiming the beginning of a new era for WCW, the real deal. Watts called the WWF a macabre cartoon and said that WCW wouldn't be having people throw up or be electrocuted, in reference to the recent angles with Ultimate Warrior and Sergeant Slaughter, although pro wrestling's most famous electrocution was at WCW's Halloween Havoc show in 1991 with Abdullah the Butch, on television. The padding on the floor was eliminated. In many states it will be kept because of commission rules in those states as far as safety regulations, with Watts saying something to the effect that real wrestlers don't need a bunch of mattresses to fall onto. If that is Watts' legit reason for removing the padding on the floor, then it doesn't seem justifiable and does seem to be behind the times. However, there is some dispute among wrestlers as to whether or not the padding serves its designed purpose, which is lessening of injuries from bumps on the floor. Certainly it lessens the hip and back injuries from bumps because the mats have more padding than concrete. However, some way argued that it creates knee and ankle injuries when guys jump off the ropes or apron because the feet aren't landing on a solid foundation. So, if arguably, removing padding decreases injuries, that's at least a legitimate justification for it. If it's being done because tough guys can land on concrete, that's simply being behind the times. Ole Anderson was introduced as the troubleshooting referee. His reactions were said to be slow and his counting of pins wasn't the least bit dramatic, but this is also his first real role as a referee, so it's way too early to make any judgment on his performance. The 2 out of 3 fall television main events have been made one fall once again, which is probably a change for the better since 2 of 3 should be saved for special circumstances and only used when the particular wrestlers are good enough to maintain interest for 3 falls. That hasn't been the case with most, but not all, of the television main events of the past 2 months, which is probably a small reason for the ratings going south. The television squash matches are being cut down in time to 2:30 or less, similar to the WWF, to make for a faster-paced television show. In a correction from an item reported here last week, the Global Wrestling Federation wasn't given notice to evict itself from the Dallas Sportatorium this past week. Max Andrews, who owns and operates the GWF, was informed last Monday that the $1 per paid admission rent has been raised to a flat rate, which was undisclosed but said to be a substantial increase. The Friday night show in Dallas drew 175 fans total. Andrews reportedly told the wrestlers on Friday that they would continue to run shows every week in Dallas and tape television no matter how low attendance dropped. GWF is currently averaging a 0.4 rating on ESPN during the weekday afternoon time slots, which is down some 65 to 70% from the early days of the GWF on ESPN and also well below the ratings that Jerry Jarrett garnered during his run in the weekday spot on the network. Television ratings for both WWF and WCW on cable, which hit an all-time low the weekend of May 9th and stayed at that level the weekend of May 16th, at a slight increase over Memorial Day weekend. WCW main event had a huge increase from its almost record low the previous week, hitting a 2.7 rating, although that number can drop to a 1.7. The combined rating for both WWF shows is slightly higher, 4.2, than the previous 2 weeks, 3.9, in which the cumulative rating of the new shows was the lowest in history. However, they are still down nearly a full point from this time a year ago, which is a huge drop-off, 20% of the audience, over a 1-year period. WBF Body Stars did in 0.6 that same weekend. Former WWF wrestler Marty Jannetty was sentenced last week on the cocaine possession charge and resisting arrest with force charge stemming from an incident late January while he and a date were attempting to get into a Tampa nightclub. Jannetty, 33, was fired by the WWF after the incident and is now working independently. Jannetty's case was not adjudicated and in exchange he accepted 6 months of community control, being under house arrest, which means he can leave his house to travel to and from jobs, but basically for no other reason. 30 months probation. He must submit to a urine test every week for 3 months and bi-weekly for the following 3 months and will then be subject to random testing over the next 2 years and 250 hours of community service. It is believed the judge was so hard on Jannetty because he was tired of pro wrestlers like Jannetty being portrayed to the public as role models and then behaving in a manner which makes those portrayals hypocritical.
It's about the time when most of the magazines that would have gone to press about the time all the charges against Titan Sports were flying would be hitting the newsstands.
U.S. News and World Reports in the issue on the stands this week has a cover story on the anabolic steroid epidemic. While the majority of news stories on this subject seemingly don't have a clue to what the real story is, this one was the exception. Although what was billed as Arnold Schwarzenegger's first public interview on the subject showed him for what he really is in talking so strongly against the drug.
This was the same Schwarzenegger who told Billy Graham, when he wanted to go public on the subject, to not hit the subject hard and to not mention names of users, and claiming that steroids didn't help him achieve his bodybuilding goals and other classic bunk about personally only using minimal amounts under a doctor's care.
Most teenage steroid users in this country, and there are hundreds of thousands of them, know full well if it wasn't for Arnold using truckloads of steroids, he would still be living in Austria and nobody would have ever heard of him. Muscle Mag International talked about the WBF steroid testing program and Lou Ferrigno's, who played TV's Incredible Hulk in the 1970s, splitting with the organization presumably over not wanting to submit to testing, with the snide remark that they didn't believe that was the reason for the Ferrigno WBF split because nobody can fail the test unless first being given approval of Vince McMahon. The case of Ferrigno was very Hulk-like in that Big Lou, who was up to 326 pounds of muscle according to MMI at the time of the split, at the age of 41, when he first joined the WBF, made a big deal in the media that he was joining the group because it had the strictest year-round steroid testing.
Despite the WBF not even testing at the time program and then leaving as soon as any testing was implemented. Another MMI item talked about an article in GQ magazine from a few months back on steroids in high schools and named Schwarzenegger, Hulk Hogan and Ben Johnson, not because he's a particularly charismatic superhero, but because his 9.79 100 on steroids and an inability to break 10.41 without showed those who compete in sports just how potentially valuable the drugs are for gaining speed, which is so valuable in so many sports. As the three individuals most influential in causing the steroid epidemic.
U.S. News didn't name names, but said the epidemic was caused by kids who looked up to certain sports and entertainment heroes that they knew were using steroids.
Iron Man was the only muscle mag to talk about McMahon's problems, saying how some of the WBF guys were embarrassed about the association.
Another new Muscle Mag, Muscle Media publication devoted about 70% to discussions about steroid use, both pro and con, mainly pro, but very serious and realistic discussions by those quite knowledgeable in the field, talked about the WBF testing and said it was real testing and the strictest around, although they didn't go so far as to say it was unbeatable, and said Titan Sports instituted it because of pressure brought on by 2020. Interestingly enough and surprisingly enough, the best coverage came in wrestling magazines, particularly the two-page editorial in the current Pro Wrestling Illustrated and two different stories in the Wrestling Main Event that hits the stands in 2 weeks, written after King and Donahue but before Now It Can Be Told,
neither of which in any way try to apologize for or whitewash any of the charges that came out during the media blitz.
The PWI editorial was shocking, not in that there was anything shocking said, but in how sound the editorial was in admitting that as long as wrestlers believe they are being rewarded for having muscles, steroid use will exist.
It also didn't try to contradict any of the charges brought forward by labeling accusers with a sour grapes tag. There is a valid point many have made against the Weston publications in the past that for the purposes of selling magazines, the PWI family has pushed certain wrestlers that look great in photos like Lex Luger and Sid Vicious as unbeatable superstars well before they could work a lick. But when the story came out, the group also didn't ignore the existence of the story.
The new WME had a strong editorial by editor Sandy Krebs in the August issue closing with, "Take a look for yourselves, you can see for your own eyes which wrestlers are taking steroids and breaking the law. These are the men who look abnormally large. Men such as these should not be admired or treated as heroes, and wrestling promoters should not give them the opportunity to become stars.
They are breaking the law and probably killing themselves in the process to get rich and become famous.
Instead of admiring men such as these, they should be pitied." There was another story about McMahon's appearances on King and Donahue which was exceedingly negative toward McMahon personally, although there was one line in there about Mel Phillips that could be taken as libelous.
I'm not certain how the rest of the dozens of newsstand wrestling mags covered, or didn't cover, the media blitz. Reader John Muse, who is also a regular columnist for 3 Count, compiled a list of all 4-star matches that either he's seen or have been reported as such thus far this year.
He also did a similar list for last year. Interestingly enough, the same wrestler had the most 4-star matches thus far in 1992 as did in 1991 Toshiaki Kawada of All Japan. Interesting since Kawada seemingly is never talked about when people talk about who the best all-around in-ring worker in the business is, which, at least in my opinion, he is right now, at least when you only include the guys since Manami Toyota is in a class by herself for execution and inventiveness and all-around athletic ability. Jushin Liger is better with the acrobatic moves and Hiroshi Hazi and Keiji Muto are more graceful and prettier to watch. but Kawada tops my list because his intensity level exceeds everyone else's. Anyway, for 1991 the top 10 were in terms of the most 4-star matches: 1. Kawada 18, 2. Mitsuharu Misawa 17, 3. Kenta Kobashi and Jumbo Tsuruta 15, 5. Bull Nakano, Akira Hokuto, Kyoko Inoue, Masafuji, Akira Tao and Tsuyoshi Kikuchi 11. Top 5 Americans were 1. Rick Steiner and Steve Williams 7, 3. Cactus Jack, Brian Pillman and Terry Gordy 6. Anyway, here is a list of all matches since December 1, 1991 that were rated 4.5 stars or better either in the Observer, Japanese Wrestling Journal or from videotapes Muse has seen. Jushin Liger vs. Brian Pillman December 27, 1991 Meadowlands 4.5 stars. Liger vs. Pillman December 28, 1991 Baltimore 4.5 stars. Mitsuharu Misawa and Toshiaki Kawada and Kenta Kobashi vs. Jumbo Tsuruta and Akira Tao and Yoshinari Ogawa 1/10 Kumamoto 4.5 stars. Misawa and Kawada and Kobashi vs. Tsuruta and Tao and Masafuchi 124 Tokyo 4.5 stars. Bestia Salvaje vs. Huracan Sevilla February 14 Mexico City 4.5 stars. Kawada and Tsuyoshi Kikuchi vs. Dan Crawford and Doug Furnace February 22 Tokyo 4.5 stars. Liger vs. Pillman February 29 Milwaukee 4.75 stars. Manami Toyota and Toshio Yamada vs. Suzuka Manami and Yumiko Hata March 7 Yokosuka 5 stars. Toyota and Yamada vs. Asia Kong and Bison Kimura March 20 Tokyo 4.5 stars. Toyota vs. Kyoko Inoue April 25 Yokohama 5 stars. Liger vs. Samurai April 30 Tokyo 5 stars. Big Van Vader and Bam Bam Bigelow vs. Hiroshi Hazi and Keiji Muto May 1 Chiba 4.5 stars. Atsushi Onita and Tarzan Goto and Leo Del Santo vs. Negro Casas and Horace Boulder and Tim Patterson May 16 Los Angeles 5 stars. Sting and Nikita Koloff and Dustin Rhodes and Barry Windham and Rick Steamboat vs. Arnold Anderson and Larry Zbyszko and Rick Rude and Steve Austin and Bobby Eaton War Games May 17 Jacksonville 5 stars. Tsuruta and Tao and Fuchi vs. Misawa and Kawada and Kobashi May 22 Sapporo 5 stars. Steamboat vs. Rude Cage Match May 30 Baltimore 4.5 stars. Mickey Doyle vs. Punisher Rock Stevens May 30 Fraser Michigan 4.75 stars. Anyway, currently most 4-star matches since December 1, 1991 would be 1. Kawada 11-2 Misawa 9-3 Tsuruta and Liger 8-5, Kobashi 7-6, Pillman Rude, Rhodes, Tao and Muto 4. As most of you probably already know, the real-life marriage of Randy Poffo, Randy Savage, 39 and Elizabeth Hewlett Poffo, 31, Elizabeth, has hit the rocks with the two recently separating after being married for more than 7 years. The two, with the exception of Hulk Hogan, were the longest-lasting main characters in the WWF. The WWF has not commented on the various reports, nor does anyone expect that they will acknowledge any of this publicly. There is no word on how this will affect the current wrestling storyline in which the marriage of the two is a key part of, although it appears thus far that nothing will be changing. Most reports, which haven't been confirmed officially by the WWF, are that Elizabeth herself is through with wrestling. No word on whether or not her name will continue to be used for angle purposes or merchandising. John Arezzi's Pro Wrestling Spotlight radio show will be moving once again to a new time slot. Starting June 20th, it'll run on Saturday nights from 11 p.m. to 12:30 a.m., still on WEBD, 10:50 a.m., in New York. Arezzi said he made the switch because he was getting too many complaints from regular listeners that because they had to work the next morning, they weren't staying up until 11 p.m. Sunday nights to listen to the show. This is the first issue of the current 4-issue set. If you've got A1 on your address label, it means your Observer subscription will expire in 3 more weeks. Renewal rates remain $12 for 8 issues, $24 for 16, $36 for 24, $48 for 36 up through $60 for 40 issues within the United States, Puerto Rico, Canada, and Mexico. Rates everywhere else are $9 for each set of 4 issues, delivered weekly via airmail, up through $90 for 40 issues. All subscription renewals, letters to the editor, news items, reports from arenas, and any other correspondence related to this newsletter should be sent to the Wrestling Observer Newsletter, P.O. Box 1228, Campbell, California 950091228. Fax messages can be sent to the Observer afternoon Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific, on a daily basis to 408-378-6562. AAA. As those who saw Galavision on Sunday realize, this group, while they do have the prime Sunday night television spot in Mexico City, the show hasn't replaced the EMLL show that airs in the United States. The US show is of some concern, and I still expect there's a good shot a switch will be made in the near future, since promoter Antonio Pena does want to promote house shows in heavy Hispanic cities, particularly Los Angeles, with Galavision being the main promotional outlet to get the wrestlers over. El Indomito, Angel Mortal, El Matematico Das, Super Muñeco, Super Pinocchio, Chacho Herides, Superstar, Marx Jr. Chicano Power Jr., Kiss, and Hombre, Marabunta, Aaron Grundy, Mike Shaw and Super Gallo have all jumped to this group in the last week. This group actually ran 2 different house shows on Friday night, both in Veracruz. In the television taping, Universo 2000 won the Mexican light heavyweight title from Mascara Sagrada and a strange DQ finish. Cien Cars was seconding his brother Universo while Superstar was seconding Sagrada. Cars kept interfering but Superstar, who is turning heel, did nothing about it. Pero Aguayo then came out to try and even things up, and when Cars tried to interfere again, Aguayo gave him a low blow and Hill Ref El Suspenders awarded both the match and the title. In Mexico and Japan, titles change hands when the champion is disqualified or counted out. To Universo 2.5 star. Aguayo and Muñeco and Solara no contest with Carson Fishman and Herides when each referee raised the hand of the different team 2.25 stars. Superstar and El Gyro and Colorado beat El Picudo and Heavy Metal Casas, Canelo Casas, and Brazo de Platino 3.25 stars and winners, and Super Gallo beat Mr. Maldad and Dr. Maldad 2.5 star. The other show on Friday night was headlined by Octagon defending the Mexican middleweight title against Fuerza Guerrera. Even though Veracruz is Octagon's hometown and Mexican tradition has it that the faces don't lose their titles in their hometown, I suspect this was also a title change. EMLL. Brazo de Plata, real name Jose Pepe Alvarado, age 30, but still grossly overweight, suffered his second mild heart attack late Wednesday night. No other details available at press time. Brazo de Plata, 1/3 of Los Brazos, at 5 foot and about 280 and built like Buddy Rose, is one of the most popular and best workers in Mexico. His weight was around the 310 mark, almost all in the stomach, and holds the UWA middleweight title, is expected to jump to this group, perhaps as soon as this weekend, although rumors about Casas jumping seem a weekly thing. AAA made a big play for Casas as well. May 29th at Arena Coliseo in Mexico City, this card will air this coming Sunday on Galavision. Saw Eclipse and Guerrero Samurai Das beat El Mestizo and Halcon Negro Jr. 2 stars. Samurai in the third fall did what amounts to a combination of Liger's shooting star press and Asai's Asai moonsault, also known as a Quebrada America and Mano Negra. El Hijo del Solitario beat Espectro Jr. and Ponzonia and Espectro de Ultra Tumba in 2 straight falls 2.5 stars. Pierroth Jr. and Jacques Mate and Supremo I beat El Filoso and Apollo Dantes and Farhan in 2 straight falls when Solitario turned heel by doing a run-in and attacking Dantes 2.5 stars, and Bestia Salvaje and Satanico and Pirata Morgan beat Atlantis and Dandy and Ultimate Draga. Yoshihiro Asai, also in 2 straight falls. In the second fall, Satanico and Morgan unmasked Atlantis, who allowed himself to be pinned rather than getting up and fighting, which would have revealed his identity. Salvaje, who is one of the best workers in Mexico now, was said to have been fantastic in making this a hot match 3.5 stars. May 22nd at Arena Coliseo saw Marabunta and Enjambre and Arcangel de la Muerte beat Eclipse and El Pegaso and Guerrero Samurai Das in straight falls 2 stars. A new trio called Los Cavernicolas, or in English, the Cavemen Popotecas and Troglodita and Cro Magna, beat Solar Das and Tiger Universitario and Solitario 2 stars. Emilio Charles Jr. and El Egipcio and Supremo Uno beat Filoso and Dantes and Solitario when Dantes and Solitario continue to have problems getting along to lead up to their breakup the following week 2.75 star. After the match, Solitario, to set up his heel turn, hit 3 photographers and was suspended for the month of June. Mark and Atlantis and Canadian Vampire Casanova beat Javier Cruz and Jerry Estrada and Pierroth in 2 out of falls when the ref stopped the match, ruling Pierroth unable to continue 3 stars. In the Cavemen trio, Troglodita used to wrestle as El Verdugo, while Cro Magnon used to wrestle as Hombre Bala. I believe both are brothers in real life of Pirata Morgan. Atlantis had an NWA middleweight title defense on May 30th in Puebla against La Fiera. Chavo Guerrero and Love Machine, Art Barr, were also working around Mexico City for this group over the weekend. UWA. May 24th at El Torreo in Naucalpan saw Connect go to a double countout with Villano Trace in the main event of a bloody match which saw both wrestlers have their masks ripped up, Coquina and Buffalo Allen, Bad News Alan Coage, and Bam Bam Bigelow, who surprisingly looks about the best of all the foreigners with the exception of Owen Hart and Chris Benoit that I've seen in working with the Mexican. Beat Los Cowboys, Silver King and El Texano and Villano 4, an all-heel match saw Black Skags from Colorado, and Negro Casas and Gigante Warrior,
Butch Masters beat Fishman and Killer and Dr. Wagner Jr., the Headhunters and Rambo beat Solar Uno and Villano Uno and Enrique Veer. Cajos Uno and Babyface beat El Coloso and El Psicodelico, and the opener had Ninja Sasuke, Masamichinoku, and Canadian Tiger, Mike Lazansky, over Momotaro, Monkey Magic Wakita, and Cajos Jr. The Wrestling Union ordered a benefit show on May 29 in San Lorenzo to help pay for medical expenses of El Mohicano I and Dragon Chino I, one of whom has a broken arm and the other a broken leg but not sure which is which. They ran the show at 5 p.m. on a Friday so all wrestlers could work their regular Friday night bookings, and used both EMLL and UWA wrestlers with Los Villanos vs. Jerry Estrada and Bestia Salvaje and Rambo on top, plus Los Cowboys, and Kato Kung Lee vs. Lobo Rubio, and El Engendro and Shu El Guerrero. The main event on May 31 at El Torreo was scheduled as Bigelow and Black Score Warrior vs. Connect, in Dr. Wagner Jr. and a mystery partner. Japanese television rundown. May 2, New Japan, 1. Koji Kanematube set Negro Casas with a Tiger suplex, a reverse grip full Nelson turned into a German suplex, on 9/14. Kanemoto is really green, but Casas carried him to a decent match which got pretty good toward the finish, particularly when Kanemoto rolled out of Casas, winning Dan in a roll-up. 2.5 stars, 2. Norio Oniga pinned Pegasus Kid, Chris Benoit, in 8 minutes with a sunset flip off the top rope. Not a lot of heat, but the work itself was very good. 3.25 stars, 3. Jushin Liger pinned David Finlay from England in 11:52 with a backward superplex while standing on the top rope. No problems here with Finlay, solid in all his moves, but he does nothing spectacular. Liger did a lot of spectacular moves, however. 3.5 stars, 4. Tony Halme and Scott Norton beat Kengo Kimura and Shinya in 9:53 when Halme pinned Kimura after a punch to the face. Halme is still really bad, to the point he stands out like a sore thumb among all the hot workers in Japan. Norton's power moves at least look convincing, whereas Halme's, who is frequently talked about in the muscle magazines as one of the strongest men in Gold's Gym in Los Angeles, don't. Norton looks monstrous, even compared with Halme. The Americans kept refusing to pin Kimura at the end. Kimura and Hashimoto didn't look good, either. All in all, this bout sucked. 1/2 star, 5. Riki Choshu and Hiroshi Hazi and Takayuki Iizuka beat Hiro Saito and Tatsutoshi Goto and Super Strong Machine in 13:46 when Iizuka pinned Saito. Finish saw Saito about to give Iizuka a superplex, but Hazi hit Saito in the back with a chair and he fell off the ropes, and Iizuka pinned him with a unique suplex. Hazi juiced in the first minute and the raging staff kept working over the cut. There were some timing problems early, but as it wore on to a fast-paced excellent match, mainly due to Hazi, who was a one-man show. Hazi did one of the best giant swings since Lioness Asuka on Goto, who also juiced like crazy since the staff undid the turnbuckle padding, but Goto also had his head run into the exposed metal. Hazi also destroyed a table with Goto's head. 3.75 stars. May 3, All Japan, 1. Abdullah the Butcher pinned Tsuyoshi Kikuchi with an elbow drop. The size difference here was so much so all Kikuchi could do was sell, and it was just a squash match. Abdullah did go up for a body slam which got a big pop since Kikuchi probably weighs 195. 1 star, 2. Kawada and Kobashi beat Tsuruta and Ogawa in 17 minutes when Kawada pinned Ogawa with a power bomb. Tsuruta and Ogawa worked on Kobashi's knee early. The last 6 minutes were full speed ahead with incredible action, with Kawada, in particular, just amazing. 4.25 stars, 3. Hansen pinned Misawa to win the champion. Hansen looks lighter, which is probably why his work, or at least his stamina, which is so important here, has improved of late. The match was slow early but never lacked for heat because the crowd was into everything they did. Misawa worked on Hansen's lariat arm most of the way. No spectacular moves, but everything was solid, the heat was super, and the finish was excellent, with Hansen finally getting the pin in 20:05 with the lariat. 4 stars. May 9, New Japan, 1. Liger pinned Oniga in a match to determine who would face Samurai in the finals of the top of the Super Junior tournament. Super heat. Liger had his neck worked over with pile drivers on the floor and in the ring, but came back and won in 14:26 with a roll-up. 4 stars, 2. Kunyaki Kobayashi beat Akitoshi Saito in 9:15 of a wrestler versus karate match, with Saito putting up the sign in the front of Musashi Aoyagi's karate dojo in Nagoya. Saito juiced early from headbutts. Really intense match. At one point, Saito was getting destroyed and one of his stale Aoyagi slapped the student around and grabbed the towel before the ref saw it. Very realistic, and for what it was super. Kobayashi finally won with an underhand wristlock submission. 3.25 stars, 3.
Liger pinned Samurai in 21-15 to win the tournament. Incredible match due to Liger, who had one of his best performances ever, carrying Samurai to a level well beyond his ability. Samurai took the early advantage, hitting Liger over and over with a beer bottle. He also worked the neck over with pile drivers. Liger made a comeback by unmasking Samurai and giving him a power bomb on the floor.
With Samurai on the floor, Liger came off the top rope headfirst like a missile and landed on Samurai's chest.
Liger did one great move after another, including an Orihara-like moonsault off the top rope to the floor.
Samurai made a comeback and did Liger's own signature dive over the top rope with a midair flip.
The moves here were far more spectacular than the Liger-Pillman match, even though Samurai isn't in Pillman's league. But Liger did everything for winning with a Frankensteiner off the top rope. 5 stars. May 10th, All Japan. They only aired one match on this show. However, they did air some clips of Rusher Kimura and Mitsuo Momota versus Haruka Eigen and Motoshi Okuma, which is the early card comedy relief with the past 40 guys. The only reason I bring this up is because Eigen is famous for being bent over the ropes and hit with a forearm like Greg and Johnny Valentine were famous for, and spitting.
What's hilarious is the crowd is almost like the old Rocky Horror crowd that brings props and everyone in the first few rows, when Eigen is bent over the rope, pulls out umbrellas and puts them over their head as he does the spit spot. They do it 2 or 3 times a match. The crowd goes nuts for the spot, even though the wrestling itself in the match is equivalent to a WWF prelim match. 1.
Misawa and Kawada and Kobashi beat Tsuruta and Fuchi and Ogawa in about 36 minutes when Kobashi pinned Fuchi with a moonsault. These guys were all obviously tired since this match took place the night after the 66-40 match and they were pacing here. It wasn't bad. But it was a notch below normal with everyone dragging. Crowd even noticed it as it didn't have the intense reactions as usual since they didn't turn it on until 28 minutes in and the crowd was all tired out by then.
There were enough moves and action for a 4-star match, but the intensity was missing.
3.25 stars. May 16th, New Japan, 1. Shiro Koshinaka beat Masashi Aoyagi in 12:01 in a wrestler versus karate match as the karate master attempted to regain the sign in front of his dojo. Aoyagi kicked Koshinaka to death early until Koshinaka came back with a back suplex. Very intense and believable with superheat. Koshinaka sold great to make this one of the better mixed matches in history. Finally, Koshinaka won via knockout after giving Aoyagi a German suplex and a dragon suplex. 4 stars, 2. Big men versus medium-sized men tag match that you'll ever see. Vader and Bigelow worked on Hazi's head early and he bled buckets. Hazi was unbelievable in taking punishment. However, the performance of Bigelow, at about 410 pounds, even outdid Hazi. Finish saw Vader pin Hazi with a urinage, a Soviet judo move. 4.5 stars, 3.
Choshu pinned Norton in 10:31 after several lariats.
Norton didn't sell Choshu's first 3 lariats. Norton has improved a lot because this match was solid all the way and Choshu is not an incredible worker. At least not anymore. Match was hurt by a weak finish as Choshu did 6 lariats in a row and pinned Norton to no crowd reaction since the final sequence was unconvincing. 2-1.
That good in the ring, and actually when he was in with Tao it was pretty bad.
Match wasn't good, but the finishing sequence with Tao and Smith ending with Tao pinning Smith with a golden arm bomber, like a short clothesline, was very good. 2.25 stars, 2. Misawa and Kawada and Kobashi beat Gordy and Williams and Slinger. Solid match all the way through, lasting more than 25 minutes. It turned into an excellent main event match with all the hot moves and near falls before Misawa pinned Slinger with a tiger suplex. Slinger was really good here in staying with those who are well above his experience level. 4 stars. May 18th, All Japan Women, 1. Takako Inoue and Mariko Yoshida won the Japanese tag team titles from Seiki Hasegawa and Debbie Malenko in 18 and a double backward superplex.
4.25 stars, 2.
Manami Toyota pinned Kyoko Inoue in 24:36 to win the IWA title. These two are probably a decade ahead of their time when it comes to putting together a match. It was so good, in some ways too good, in that the people were just in awe of it to the point they could barely react. The moves were all new, so people had no idea what was coming next. Toyota's performance in this match, and for 1992 in general, can't even be given words to describe it, although she is the outstanding wrestler of 1992, male or female.
The only way I can describe this match is to say that it had the same impact as the first time I saw Tiger Mask vs. Dynamite Kid's match in 1982, in that they were years ahead of to the level of some of their matches in the past and they simply couldn't follow the previous match. They brawled early and both took major potato shots, which results in closing each other's eyes. Both juiced, but even with it they couldn't get the crowd up because of the previous match. Kong did a crossbody off the top rope to the floor. Nakano put on a great performance in carrying Kong.
Kong doesn't have the ability of the other top women in this promotion and wasn't at her best here, probably because she was shaken up by the potato shots with the chairs. Nakano did several great moves at the end, including a tremendous dive through the ropes for her size, a somersault leg drop, and finally a picture-perfect moonsault. 3.5 stars. USWA. They are continuing to push the main thing being the promotion versus promoting by his real name was. The gate was up to $8,500, about 1,700 fans, on May 26 for the double main with Jerry Lawler versus Marty Jannetty, who no-showed and was replaced by Stephen Dane, and Eddie Gilbert versus Jeff Jarrett. The Gilbert-Jarrett match was Gilbert deliberately hit the ref for the DQ as Jarrett was coming off the top rope. A major argument ensued because USWA rules, which have generally been ignored in similar situations, are that a title can change via a DQ but global rules are different. A big argument ensued and Guy Coffey, playing the subtle heel USWA promoter, ordered the belt be given back to Gilbert because the match was under global rules. Prentice came out and announced that the GWF had just signed a new tag team, the Moon, and gained control of all the belts. This is pretty much the direction of the 1990-91 Bowder and the Booker stuff, but the tag team will be Cujo and Spa, Lanny Keane and Larry Booker. Pez Whatley came in as Jarrett's partner against the Moondogs for this week because he said he heard what Global is trying to do and he wants to help. Lawler then did an interview on television and argued with Prentice about what Global is trying to do. He then claimed Prentice didn't even know Marty Jannetty, who had no-showed on Monday legit because of his legal problems, and who showed up on television, but Jannetty, who told Lawler he was behind the times. They held the show at the Mid-South Coliseum on Saturday night, May 30th, instead of the normal Monday night, and drew 1,800 fans, which is about double the normal weekly crowd. As Cujo went to a double disqualification with Jarrett and Whatley, Gilbert retained what is billed as the Global Wrestling Federation title, pinning King Cobra, Jimmy Kimball, and Lawler kept the USWA title, beating Jannetty via DQ. Global. May 29th at the Dallas Sportatorium drew 175 fans for a card promoted as the Night of Global Gold. Complete results saw Booker T. of the tag team called the Ebony Experience beat Sean Stevens via DQ and the Beach Bully. Stacy Porto interfered. Chaz Taylor pinned Maniac Mike Davis, after Billy Joe Travis attempted interference backfired. The Goodfellows, Gary Young and Stephen Dane, beat The Connection, Rod Price and John Tata. When Young pinned Tatum, the Ebony Experience, Booker T and Stevie Ray, no relation to the Steve Ray from Kansas City, beat the Beach Boys. Three guys entered in a round robin. Simmons pinned Travis. Sims then wrestled Taylor and won when Taylor injured his leg and couldn't continue. Chess forfeited his match to Travis, but it didn't matter since Sims had won both his matches and he became the new champion. Also, Bill Irwin beat Young via DQ when Johnny Mantell interfered. Sims beat Mike via DQ when Mike hit the referee. Tugboat Taylor and Dewey, formerly Awesome Kong, real name Dwayne McCulloch, beat Beach Boy and Beach Bully via countout, and the finale saw Scott Putski win the vacated GWF North American title, formerly held by Eddie Gilbert, who never dropped the title before leaving the promotion, beat Mantell when Bill Irwin tripped Mantell to lead to the pin. Sam Houston no-showed the card and is presumed to be history, which would leave no out-of-town talent left with the promotion. The June 5th card at the Sportatorium has an elimination tag team match with Tugboat Taylor and Price and Tatum versus Dane and Young and Skander Akbar and Mantell versus Irwin. Kids under 12 will attendance. Oregon. The May 30th card in Portland drew 80 fans, and that's including kids, who were admitted free, with the crowd held down because of the Rose Festival, since Rose Festival time is traditionally the time of the smallest crowds in Portland anyway. Results of Don Owen's final card saw the change in promotion philosophy as Al Madril went to a 20 minutes draw with Brickhouse Brown. Ron Harris beat Bart Sawyer when Don Harris came down and hit Sawyer with a gimmick. Don Harris went to a 30 minutes draw with Jesse Barr, and after the match Barr asked for 5 minutes more, and they went the 5 minutes in a 1960s style match with tight mat wrestling. The Grappler no-showed the tag team title match with no explanation given nor announcement made about the tag team titles, so Steve Dahl went against both Colonel De Beers and John Rambo for 15 minutes until Brown came down to save Dahl and got Dahl disqualified. The main event saw Ryuma Go and Masahiko Takasugi beat Mike Winner and Madi Irakura when Go made Irakura submit in more than 20 minutes of a solid but The fans really didn't know what to make of the main event since there were no heels involved. There will no longer be shows at Uncle Milt's Pizza in Vancouver, Washington, where they were taping the public access television show. The final show aired this past weekend and was taped on May 26. Sandy Barr's first Portland show, in order to have a television show for this weekend, was taped on June 1st in Portland with Dahl and Brown versus De Beers and Rambo and Go and Irakura versus Harris Brothers. Will all seats free in general admission and $5 for ringside as a way to boost the crowd up from the depths it has fallen. It is an expected Barr will move the cards regularly to Mondays, but probably after this week go back to Saturday. However, with the cancellation of the weekly stop at Uncle Milt's, it's another regular spot show down the drain. All the wrestlers who work here have regular day jobs anyway, but this week there are only 2 cards during the week. Here and there. The WWA promotion returned to Los Angeles at Cal State Los Angeles Gym on May 31st, drawing a crowd estimated by 1,800. Tickets were $10, $15, and $20. However, unlike usual crowd distribution, this time the $10 seats were filled but the ringside was empty. In the top 3 matches, FMW wrestler Akihito Ichihara beat Ultra Tiger, Yuka Hideano, another FMW wrestler, the Mercenaries Tim Patterson and Billy Anderson, and Luis Piccoli, went to a no contest with Fantasma from Mexico City teaming with Mondo and Eddie Guerrero in a good match which ended when the Guerrero brothers turned heel on Fantasma and it nearly caused a riot. Main event saw Loverboy and Ultraman 2000, Amigo Ultra in FMW, and Bull Raider, formerly Rey Mysterio, over El Cobarde Dawson Fishman and Negro Casas, and after the match Casas turned face and was attacked by his former partners and saved by Raider. Elio Del Santo was originally to oppose Casas in the main event, but wasn't advertised locally since around Tuesday they found out he wouldn't be appearing. The last 2 matches were said to be good, but this was nowhere near the level of the card. Show is June 14th in the same building with Pero Aguayo appearing, and they have a July 4th outdoor show which will definitely include the entire FMW crew from Japan and Atsushi Onita and an explosive barbed wire match in the main event. The debut of WWA Wrestling in Reseda, California for a 6-week run on Thursday nights at the Reseda Country Club wasn't nearly as successful, drawing a crowd of about 40 fans. They run again this coming Thursday and are cutting tickets down $2 per head, although that isn't the answer, using mainly Tijuana-based wrestlers. Eddie Sharkey is running PWA shows in the Minneapolis area on June 2nd and June 3rd using Lightning Kid, Jerry Lynn, Charlie Norris and others including Terry Power vs. Denise Storm for the LPWA title on both shows. Iqua on May 28th in Tampa drew 145 as Steve Collins beat Kenny Kendall 1/2 of 1-star Okano Kid, a Japanese wrestler from Wing being trained in Tampa, beat Coconut Man 1 1/2 star, Nick Slater pinned Hercules 1 and finish. Terminators Al Green and Mark Laurinaitis won the U.S. Tag Team titles from Iceman, Ricky Santana, and Alan Iron Eagle 3 stars. Santana subbed for No-Show Lou Perez, and the main event saw Jimmy Backlund beat Mark Starr in a 2 of 3 fall match 2 1/4 star. May 30th in Tampa saw Star beat Mean Street, Tommy Starr, Brady Boone, Firecat in Japan, beat Coconut Man, Star Riders beat Southern Posse, Sonny Trout and Rick Thames, Slater pinned Collins and Star beat Backlund in a loser leaves town match, since Backlund is going to Japan for the Wing 2. Expect to see some of the IWF wrestlers in Florida working on indie shows since almost all of the contracts expired and a lot of the guys quit. IWF is only running 2 shows this coming month, and Eddie Mansfield had the guys originally sign exclusive contracts. Dennis Corluzzo and Larry Sharp ran a WWA show on May 30th in Clementon, New Jersey, drawing 700 fans as Boy Gone Bad. Joe Daniels won the WWA title beating Spider, Glenn Ruth, when Val Bad Brass Knucks in a Texas death match where the loser would have to leave the ring in a body bag. Also Chris Candido beat Barry Hardy. The South American Cartel, Bobby Muniz and Chi Gomez, kept their WWA tag team titles beating Mr. Nice and Victor Rivera Jr. when Nice turned on Rivera and unmasked to reveal AC Golden. Corluzzo and Sharp are promoting a boxing show in the same building on June 6th, and it'll include a 3-round match with Boy Gone Bad vs. Spider in an attempt to draw wrestling fans to the boxing show. Tatsumi Fujinami, as part of his comeback in Japan, is touring various wrestling schools in the Northeast including Killer Kowalski's, Johnny Rods and Sharp's, and will have matches on June 2nd with some of Sharp's students taped for Japanese television. May 30th in Caguas, Puerto Rico for the WWC saw Heartbreaker Adonis, Frankie Lancaster, beat Rock and Rebel, Rex King beat Fidel Sierra, David Cannell aka David Sierra, via DQ, PN News and Canadian Giant, Greg Rob Murdoch and Nabila Hussein. Lou Fabiano when News pinned Murdoch, El Bronco #1 beat Invader #1 Jose Gonzalez via DQ, Carlitos Colon beat Abilla the Butcher in a cage match, Ron Starr and Doug Masters retained the WWC Tag Team titles beating La Ley and Cyclone Salvadorino, and Canadian Giant won a 30-man battle royal. Buddy Rogers has informed us reports of him putting together a July 4th nightclub show in Fort Lauderdale are erroneous. Freddie Fargo ran a show on May 28th in San Angelo, Texas as Chaz Taylor beat Jimmy James in a man vs. woman match. Savage Sherry Cliff, a female powerlifter, pinned Los Tito both in their first pro matches. Tugboat Taylor double countout King Stomper, Gary Vines, Terry Sims beat Lex Gretel, Jeff Gretler, The Connection, Tatum and Price, beat the Goodfellows, Dane and Young, and Chaz won a battle royal. Fargo and Sims did a lot of local PR work, including appearing at 6 schools delivering anti-gang and anti-gun messages. 12 in Dallas, Texas as Young Drew Action Jackson, James Penn Beach Boy, Sean Summers, California Stud, Price, beat Ray Evans, Iceman King Parsons pinned Nick Hernandez, who was so impressive even Parsons complimented him, and Big D, promoter Gary Sturtevant, and Tatum beat the Animal and Fargo. Los Verdugos from Guatemala appeared May 31st in Los Angeles on the Jalisco Promotion Show at the All Nations Center. Tiger Jeet Singh along with students from the Sweet Daddy Siki and Ron Hutchison Pro Wrestling Training Center of Toronto will be doing a show on June 6 in Brampton, ONT as part of an East Indian festival. Admission is free. Wrestling Independent Network had a show May 17 in Baltimore. Adrian Hall and Morgus the Maniac debuted as tag team Beauty and the Beast against the Cream Team, Rip Sawyer and Dave Casanova, which ended in a DQ when Hall put lipstick on Casanova and promoter Ed Zone. Rematch June 14 in the Baltimore Original Sports Bar Cold Star Mangled Banner I, as Wahoo McDaniel won a battle royal and won via DQ over Ivan Koloff, plus Ringlords kept the SAP tag team titles beating Tommy Gunn and Chaz Rocco. UWA has a show on June 6 in St. Mary's High School in South Amboy, New Jersey with Honky Tonk Man Nikolai Volkov, Ivan Koloff, Jim Neidhart and more. Sunflower State Wrestling on May 22 in Hoisington, Kansas drew 54 as Panther beat Irish Hitman in a hair versus hair match. Bill Dannenhuser, who worked in Portland as the Equalizer and in Europe as the Barbarian, is working here as the Renegade, teaming with Ron McFarlane. Marty Jannetty and Makan Singh Mike Shaw were scheduled to appear at the West 4 Wrestling Alliance in Winnipeg's May 31 television taping. May 30th in Wallingford, Connecticut drew 275 for a free show which included the Bushwhackers beating Double Trouble, formerly the Undertakers from ICW, Rochester Roadblock, Cool Charisma, Chris Candido beat Ray Odyssey, Vic Steamboat. A couple of matches reported to be incredible appeared in small indie circuits this past week. On May 30th in Fraser, Michigan before 289, 188 paid, saw Mickey Doyle keep his North American title beating Punisher Rock Stevens in an explosive match with falls counting anywhere in the building in 22-17 with them brawling up the aisle, into the stairway, through the concourse, into the hockey players' benches, into the rear tunnel, back onto the floor. After body slamming Doyle on the floor, Stevens tried to run him over with the Zamboni but officials threatened to disqualify him so he didn't do it. Think about that one. The guy is about to attempt to commit murder by running a guy over, but when threatened with a disqualification, he stopped, in a match said to be 4 3/4 stars and was taped for television. John McAdam and Cody Boyne's Universal Championship Wrestling ran a show on May 29 in Nashua, New Hampshire before 166, 130 paid, as Kamikaze Bill Wilcox pinned Freight Train Fulton to become the first use 4.5 stars, and it was also taped for television. They run their next card on June 12 at St. Stanislaus Hall with the Thunderbolts vs. Untouchables in an explosive match and Wilcox defending the title against Vince Apollo plus a 14-man battle royal to determine the first TV champion. The guys in this group, from what I'm told, really work hard and it's a promotion aimed mainly for hardcore fans. WCW. Bill Watts' first television tapings took place June 1 before a full house of 800 fans at the center stage. Watts was Jim Ross guest host on the show that airs June 13. Watts did a strong interview announcing several of the changes. Ole Anderson did an interview after being announced as troubleshooting ref, which wasn't one of his best ones, but still good. The heels and faces now come out of different entrances at center stage. The non-squash matches taped saw Dustin Rhodes beat Tracy Smothers, Sting beat Diamond Dallas Page 1 1/4 stars, and Steiners beat Arnold Anderson and Steve Austin interview where he smashed a crate over his head. The June 20th show saw Ross of Dusty Rhodes as guest host. Arnold Anderson did an excellent interview talking about his series of matches with Sting, although no word on when the feud even starts. TV main event saw Greg Valentine beat Tom Zank in a 1-star match, and it appeared Zank blew out his knee during the match. There was more of an emphasis on mat work as opposed to flying moves, with no top rope moves and only 2 moves off the middle rope. The squash matches all lasted around 2:30, similar to WWF squashes. WCW Pro taping took place May 27 in Anderson, South Carolina before 1,800 fans as Freebirds, working as heels, drew with Zank and Marcus Bagwell. Rhodes beat Taylor Made Man, a pretty good match that aired this past Sunday on Main Event. They did an angle with Ron Simmons vs. Super Invade, Hercules, and also set up Rick Steamboat vs. Cactus Jack, Rhodes vs. Valentine and Rude vs. Koloff matches. Steiners beat Anderson, and latest word on Big Van Vader's knee injury suffered in Japan is that there is no chance he'll be missing the Bash pay-per-view, as it'll probably be scoped, which generally means 1 to 2 weeks off. On television this weekend,
Jesse Ventura continually stressed how the Steiners had never lost a match 1-2-3 in history, which must come as news to anyone who ordered at least 2 pay-per-view shows that come to mind where they lost to Doom, which was a few years back and most people have forgot, and to Sting and Muta, which just aired a few months ago although probably nobody ordered it.
Speaking of PPVs, Jim Ross said on John Arezzi's radio show on Sunday night that the Wrestle War show did in 0.61 buy rate, which sounds like a totally honest figure. Announcing an honest pay-per-view buy rate may not be a first, but it's certainly in the minority of pay-per-view buy rate announcements in this business and would be a first if it was in another company,
which would translate into about 115,000 buys, both of which would be just about the lowest ever.
Gary Juster has been elevated to the head of all promoters and the touring schedule and overseeing the work of the promoters. May 30th in Baltimore, Drew 3000 as Zinc pinned Joey Maggs, Van Hammer pinned JT Southern, Rhodes Drew Valentine, Brian Pillman pinned Scotty Flamingo to keep the light heavyweight title. Steiners beat Bobby Eaton and Cactus Jack and Paul E. dangerously when Rick pinned Eaton.
During the match, Dangerously tried to run away but was met in the aisle by Larry Zbyszko who threw him back to the Steiners. Also Barry Windham pinned Taylor, Sting and Koloff beat Anderson and Austin and Rude beat Steamboat in a cage match said to be 4.5 stars.
May 28th in Raleigh Drew 1800 as Hammer beat Southern, Pillman beat Flamingo, Steiners beat Eaton and Zbyszko, Rhodes Drew Valentine, Windham beat Cactus Jack, Taylor pinned Zank, Sting and Koloff beat Anderson and Austin in a cage match and Rude beat Steamboat in a cage match.
The Rude Steamboat cage matches end when Steamboat has Rude hung upside down by his ankles in the cage and throws 2 tackles at him, and when he goes for a third, Medusa on Region Rude recovers and hits the Rude Awakening for the pin.
They do a spot every night where Steamboat superplexes Rude off the top of the cage and the bouts range from very good to incredible. With the new blood policy, there was no blood in any of the cage matches. May 29th in Norfolk Drew 2200 as Zenk beat Cactus Jack, Hammer beat Southern, Windham and Rhodes beat Taylor and Valentine, Pillman pinned Flamingo, Steiners beat Eaton and Zbyszko in Dangerously, Sting and Koloff beat Anderson and Austin in a cage match and Rude beat Steamboat in a 2 of 3 fall cage match. Southern is probably history as he isn't on future booking sheets.
Ditto Tommy Rich, although he may work television. Eaton worked this weekend against doctor's orders and rational advice since they had nobody who would fit in given the storyline to take his spot in the 4.5-man tag matches with Steiners. Steiners worked easy with him since he really couldn't do much.
Highlights of this past weekend's television saw Rude beat Rhodes in the finals of the Nintendo Top 10 Challenge in a 3-wide.
WCW Saturday night had Muta vs. Brad Armstrong in a 2-straight fall match that went 28 minutes.
Armstrong is a great worker and Muta is in the top 5 or 6 in the world and was over like crazy to boot even though he never was turned, but that match was too long for television even though what the guys did was technically very good. Even though the Zbyszko Dangerous Alliance breakup aired on Saturday night, the actual breakup on the mic was really good, but the match itself didn't sustain the interest it should have considering how much time has gone into the breakup and it made it seem insignificant when it was never talked about again for the rest of this.
They will still air segments teasing the breakup on syndication this coming weekend.
Complete Beach Blast show on June 20th on pay-per-view has Steamboat vs. Rude in a 30-minute challenge, Steiners defending against Gordy and Williams, Eaton and Anderson and Austin vs. Rhodes and Windham and Koloff, Sting vs. Cactus Jack in Falls Count Anywhere, Medusa vs. Missy Hite in a bikini pose dow,
Pillman vs. Flamingo for the light heavyweight title, Simmons vs. Taylor and
Watts was on Jim Ross radio show and talked about many things you already read, plus when asked, said that he had no interest in bringing in Sid Vicious and made it clear that the wrestlers you see advertised on television will appear for the live shows because no shows aren't going to be tolerated any longer. Jim Ross on Arezzi's radio show said the Saturday TBS show would contain more spontaneous action, episodic television and more emphasis on interviews.
When asked who the best all-around wrestler in WCW was, Ross replied Anderson and complimented Hiroshi Hazu when a caller asked about the tag team tournament, saying he was one of the top 4 wrestlers in the world.
There seems to be almost no talk at all about Jake Roberts coming in. And to leave you with something scary, several of the Bash shows in July will be headlined by Sting defending against Super Invader. WWF. On the wrestling television show, which is spending more and more time promoting the bodybuilding pay-per-view show, they announced the bodybuilding event is being sold out live, which is surprising since I spent the weekend in Los Angeles, and they were doing ticket giveaways galore on local radio and publicizing the event with no mention of it being sold out.
Nor has there been any public mention of the change in Live site.
The bit about the WBF setting the standard for drug-free sports competition may be the greatest example of gall ever by this organization. Even if we are to believe that all of the bodybuilders are off all drugs, which nobody in the bodybuilding world I've talked with seems to think is even a remote possibility, but we will know for sure in 2 weeks, You are talking about men who presumably all were heavy drug users, most for a decade plus.
With some, according to Muscle Mag International, piling up annual bills in excess of $100,000, and certainly most were piling up annual drug bills in excess of $30,000 in recent years, since virtually all pro bodybuilders over the past few years use the expensive growth hormone. Even if these guys have been completely clean for 3 months and don't use Esiclene before the contest, Esiclene is not a steroid and I don't believe it can be tested for, but it's a European drug pro bodybuilders now use the day before the show because it creates an inflammation in the muscle. Thus the muscle itself swells for about 48 hours and creates freaky size in the small muscles like the rear deltoids, biceps and calves, both of which are debatable. 10 years of being some of the most prolific drug users in any sport followed by 3 months. It's the secret for developing these physiques, and most don't even use supplements, and even among those who'd, it isn't much of a factor in building a freaky physique. As far as what was talked about on the John Arezzi radio show last week by Lee Cole and Murray Hodgson, WWF spokesperson Steve Planamena said the organization has better things to do than worry about Cole in reference to Cole's claim the WWF attempted to get him sent to prison because they knew he had information on that.
As for Hodgson, Planamena said, he's very adamant about what he says, but I don't know there's much truth to what he says. Hopefully we'll all find out when it goes to court.
Jerry McDevitt, McMahon's attorney, who was the recipient of much negative discussion on the same show, didn't return our phone calls.
A few weeks back on Primetime they aired some old tapes with Mel Phillips as ring announcer, which he believes they are going to bring Phillips back. I didn't take that seriously and felt they just needed to put an old match in for purposes that have nothing to do with Phillips possibly being ring announcer, even though nothing appears on WWF television by accident.
But now with tapes of Phillips ring announcing for the 3rd straight week on Primetime, it no longer seems like a coincidence.
Cole claimed in the contract his brother signed with Titan that it specified that Phillips and Terry Garvin wouldn't be brought back, but that there was no mention in the contract of Pat Patterson. Results from television taping June 1st in Hamilton, ONT before 9,000 fans. No word on paid versus paper. In non-squash matches, Jim Brunzell pinned Kato Dud, Razor Ramon, Scott Hall pinned Jim Powers 1 star. Ramon lost fan interest very quickly. Few appeared to recognize him as Diamond Stud or Scott Hall. Bret Hart beat Rick Martel via DQ in an angle. Martel used and had him in the Boston Crab. Michaels then did a run-in and attacked Hart and the bell rang. Martel got up thinking Hart had submitted and he'd won the title, and when he got the word, he and Michaels began shoving each other back and forth. 2.5 stars. Money Incorporated, Ted DiBiase and IRS beat High Energy own Hart and Coco Ware by a countout when IRS hit Hart with his briefcase outside the ring. 1.5 star, where mainly did comedy and Hart was rarely in. Undertaker pinned Berserker and gave Fuji a pile driver afterward. 2 star. Randy Savage kept the title, pinning Michaels. 3 stars, best match on show, all for Michaels as Savage wasn't into the match at all. Warrior pinned Shango 1/2 of 1 star at a 40-man battle royal with 20 stars and 20 jobbers, ended with British Bulldog, back from his suspension, winning. Notes from the squash matches. Berserker did a run-in and Mr. Fuji tried to steal the urn, but Undertaker made his own save. Nails Kevin Wakehalls did 2 squashes with both jobbers doing stretcher jobs. He didn't get over it all and looked terrible, so listen for the sound sweetening. Paul Ellering brought out a puppet called Freckles, which he said was a prized item of the Legion of Dooms from when they were kids. Hawk said he hadn't seen Freckles since he was 12 years old. It appears they are setting up the Beverleys to steal Freckles to add heat to the angle. This interview may not air, because they screwed it up the first time and the crowd booed so loudly when they try to retake that it may not be usable. Papa Shango's skull now shoots flares in the air. May 29th at the Target Center in Minneapolis drew 4,400 as Crush, Ryan Adams, beat Kato, Tom Boric, High Energy beat Nasty Boys via count out, Martel pinned Tito Sent, Legion of Doom beat Beverly Brothers, Jim Duggan beat Repo Man via DQ. Bret Hart pinned Michaels and Warrior pinned Shango. May 28th in Denver drew 3,100 with the same results as Minneapolis. Colonel Mustafa is apparently history as his warlord. They are doing a voodoo spot during the Warrior Shango matches where Warrior sells without being touched, and the reaction in every city is groaning and in some cases, people walking out of the building in disgust, which is interesting because they put them on early in the show every night. May 31st in Peterborough, ONT drew 3,000 as Crush pinned Kato Dud, Duggan pinned Repo Man -5 stars. Legion of Doom Animal pinned Blake Beverly, Mike Enos, 1 star. Warrior pinned Shango -5 stars. Martel pinned Santana 1 star. Bret Hart pinned Michaels 3 stars and Owen Hart and were stars. May 30th in Auburn Hills, Michigan drew 4,100 with the same results as Minneapolis except Nasty Boys beat High Energy. Big Boss Man will be off bookings for about a month to sell his injury from Nails, Kevin Wakel's, which aired on television this weekend. Boss Man will also tour in June for SWS. May 26th in Tucson drew 2,900 as Kato beat Dale Wolf, Martel pinned Santana, Ware and Owen Hart beat Nasty Boys via countout, Crush beat Repo Man, Legion of Doom beat Beverly's, Bret Hart pinned Michaels and Warrior pinned Shango. Continued on page 10. The reader's pages. Bob Hutt of 8061 Arbor Drive, Nashville, Tennessee 37221 has photos for sale and you can get a list with his ace and is looking for tape of the LPWA pay-per-view show and wrestling photos from the 60s and 70s. 322 Harrington Street, Garden Grove, California 92643 has tape of the first AAA show and can tape future AAA shows, and is looking in exchange for other wrestling tapes and back issues of newsletters. Danny D'Angelo of 1252 N. Clara Avenue, DeLand, Florida 32720 has videos for trade and can do drawings and caricatures of wrestlers, and will send more info with a SACE. Bill Donna of RD2, Box 480, Rockaway, Pennsylvania 15824 is looking for a tape of the May 20th/92 MTV show that ran from 4 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time, which had clips from Johnny Rod's wrestling school, and is also looking for a video of Paul Roma's first boxing match. Jay Dennis of RD4, Box 269, Pleasant Valley, New York 12569 is looking for Memphis and Smoky Mountain tapes. Gary Waugh in Ann Oakdale, Salina, Kansas 67401 has photos for sale. Dave Prozik of 2278 Hidden Creek CT, Lisle, Illinois 60532 is starting a bi-weekly newsletter called Outside Interference for $6 for 4 issues. David Brown of 14437 Wedgeworth Drive, Hacienda Heights, California 91745 is looking for Hulk Hogan vs. Ric Flair matches from Madison Square Garden. John Fogelman of 65-205 79th PL, Middle Village, New York 11379 is looking for pre-1990 Wrestling Observer yearbooks and can trade 1984-86 Observers in exchange, and 1989-90 torches. Anton Reniti of 2160 Golden Hills Road, La Verne, California 91750 is looking for tape of Jimmy Snuka cage match from MSG, Backlund vs. Superstar Billy Graham title change match and Backlund vs. Iron Sheik title change match. Joseph Giannotto of 472 Grammaton Avenue #1E Mount Vernon, New York 10552 has tapes of 2 United Kingdom WWF wrestling shows headlined by Savage vs. Michaels for trade. Jerry Lane of 530 6th Street No. 2, South Boston, Massachusetts 02127 is looking for tapes of the Donahue and King segments with Vince McMahon and As Now It Can Be Told and A Current Affair segments to trade in exchange. Bob Roman of 33 Watts, French Avenue, Manville, New Jersey 08835 is looking for VHS tapes of the WWF with the 1960s and 70s from Washington, D.C. Bill Anderson of 4712 Silvergate Drive, Florida 58203 with trade tapes for anything except WWF matches, and is looking for matches with the Sheik. Sam Knorr at 510-944-0987 is having a get-together in Walnut Creek, California for Beach Blast, and is inviting any Observer readers in the area to attend. Wrestling Scandals. The recent letter from Scott Brooks of Pennsylvania was one of the best letters you've published this year. Scott seemed to tap into a vein of resentment against not only Vince McMahon, but against powerful people who are able to use legal niceties to hide from the truth and circumvent justice. I agree with Brooks completely about Vince McMahon. Not only do we have the latest list of things that have gotten so much media attention, but many of us know a lot more things that haven't even started being brought up yet. I would think some of those items are at least as important as encouraging and practically making use of their power for purposes of moral corruption. However, I must part with Brooks in his plea for you to drop journalistic objectivity and begin a campaign against McMahon. While there is an argument for doing so, it would risk the very existence of the Observer. For a decade, the Observer has been the most respected journalistic tool that covers pro wrestling. Even though I presently write a column for Wade Keller's Pro Wrestling Torch, there is no doubt the Observer is the hallmark of which all other newsletters are judged. If you take the advice of Scott Brooks, the whole thing could blow up. Wrestlers, promotions, television shows are going to come and go, but pro wrestling will always be here. I want to make sure that a decade from now, the Observer is still there to cover it and does so with the same high journalistic standards that it has demonstrated so far. Chris Zavisa, Plymouth, Michigan. My opinion of Murray Hodgson has been great. Pro Wrestling Spotlight radio show. On the Donahue Show, I perceived Hodgson as being an incredibly intelligent individual. However, he has either made a judgment error or wants to settle his case with the WWF out of court. Hodgson, on the show, explained how a person from his past was being brought in by Jerry McDevitt to destroy his reputation. However, he said that he has spoken to this star witness and that the WWF should be careful in deciding who is actually on their side. I know quite a bit about lawsuits, and the one thing any lawyer will advise you to do is not talk about any of the plans you have for the case. Murray played his cards way too early, though he will deny emphatically that he wants to settle. I think that is the route he is going to go. Andrew Goldberger, Port Jefferson Station, New York. Response from Dave Meltzer: this case isn't going to that's why you sue. I thought you would be interested in knowing that the Roanoke, Virginia station that used to carry the WWF Superstars program is dropping the show at the end of this month. The program director of the station told me the ratings have dropped significantly since the news of all the WWF scandals hit the media a few months back. Richard Martin, Roanoke, Virginia. Juicing. The OSHA has instituted strict guidelines for the handling of bodily fluids. Failure to comply with the rules may result in significant fines. In the era of AIDS, blading in wrestling is imbecilic. Dr. Richard Siegel. Bethpage, New York. Honesty in wrestling. I take exception to Scott Stevens' letter saying that all wrestlers make themselves believe lies. There is a crucial point in that all wrestlers have to know fact from fiction. However, out and giving away trade secrets to everyone and anyone is not lying nor necessarily a business based on a lie. I do agree with him that some wrestlers are like that, but promoters and Mark magazine writers are a lot worse. Believe me, I've met many of all three and the wrestlers are the far more honest group of the three. If Mr. Stevens believes that pro wrestling itself is a lie, then he shouldn't support it. I'm surprised with your knowledge of the Japanese psychology of wrestling that you don't see the value in putting Stan Hansen over in the Carnival tournament. The Japanese love rooting for the underdog, and by making Hansen look unbeatable right now, it makes Mitsuharu Misawa even more of an underdog. When he finally wins the Triple Crown, he'll get the same reaction he got the first time he beat Jumbo Tsuruta, where people were crying in the seats about his victory. But this time it'll be bigger and even more intense. Mike Kelly, Garden City, Michigan. Living in Japan, I unfortunately don't get a chance to see your newsletter, but a friend informed me you printed my letter in which I explained my connection with UWF International and first-hand understanding of the agreement between UWFI and Trevor Berbick and James Warra. He also said you again asserted that Berbick didn't accept the rules and was made to fight under adversarial conditions, and that Waring was somehow double-crossed. Concerning Waring, I again repeat that I always said the fight was a shoot. There was absolutely no incentive for Waring to go the distance and not knock out Billy Scott. He would have realized the same purse if he went the distance, knocked Scott out in any round, won by decision, or lost. The only condition was that he participate honestly to the beat of his ability. If, as you wrote, Waring thought it was an exhibition but was surprised to find Scott shooting, why didn't he knock out the kid? Everyone I knew couldn't take out a young amateur wrestler who had only studied UWF style for a few weeks. Again, Waring had absolutely no incentive to carry a kid who was trying to shoot on him. This makes no sense. Concerning Berbick, I've enclosed 2 letters from people to whom Berbick said that he was ready for Takada and that if Takada tried kicking the legs, he would destroy Takada. Jim Doherty was the television interviewer and announcer who spoke with Berbick several times. Pat McCarthy was a judge for the match. Both gentlemen's letters clearly explain that Berbick knew the rules and was prepared to make Takada pay dearly for kicking the leg. I also enclose a copy of a photo which shows Berbick wearing karate-style leg protectors in the ring. A boxer never wears this type of protection. Only someone who knows he is going to defend kicks to the legs wears this type of gear. This is proof that he knew and accepted the rules going into the ring. I also enclosed a copy of the rules which were read, signed and accepted by Berbick, his manager and his lawyer. These rules were attached to the contract. Paragraphs 1 and 5 couldn't be more clear, could they? Gene Pelk, UWF International. Tokyo, Japan. Response from Dave Meltzer, according to a letter sent by Jim Doherty to Gene Pelk on January 16. He spoke of a television interview before the fight in Korakuen Hall in Japan. Mr. Berbick and his lawyer were told during my interview that kicks to the lower legs were in the rules, and both Berbick and Waring sat in the stands as an official of the UWF explained the rules to the fans. Trevor, in fact, stated that if he was knocked down on the mat that he could take care of himself. He referred to growing up in a very tough neighborhood and having learned how to wrestle and street fight. In the dressing room hallway downstairs, Berbick loud voiced that if he was kicked in the legs that it would be the start of World War III, and that he would tear Takada's head off.
If Waring or Berbick claim that they were not aware of the kicking rule, they certainly forgot their remarks, my remarks, and the UWF demonstration they witnessed 1 week prior to the fight. It is my opinion that Berbick is a bad loser and Waring is a bad loser as well. We saw a similar attitude demonstrated by Mr. Lee Iacocca of Chrysler last week, so this behavior is not unexpected of the fighters in question. Judge McCarthy wrote, having been a part of the Takada vs. Berbick mixed match, I find it somewhat unbelievable that rumors suggest that Berbick was unaware of the low leg kick rule. I was witness to a number of conversations where Mr. Berbick, in a boastful manner, described what and how he would handle the wrestler kicking low. The 2 key rules Pelk referred to were, 1. The bouts shall combine the techniques of wrestling, kickboxing. Such techniques shall include punching, kicking, kneeing, and wrestling with submission holds included. All fighters shall wear the equipment as is used